And now, the best 60-ish seconds of your week.
And the campaign really hits the road now here in my home state of Pennsylvania and in other places across the nation as the primary season winds to a conclusion and we get ready for the conventions this summer. And the trials continue to run on and on and on. Most notably, this one up in New York. We've talked about it before, but I'll say it again. This case should never, ever have been brought. If you look at it, what is the crime? What is it that Donald Trump is actually charged with? Go ask your friends and neighbors. Oh yeah, we're watching this hush money. It's not about hush money. What is this trial really all about? Well, the fact of the matter is, if there was a crime, and there wasn't, it would have been under the New York statute, the state statute, and it would have been a misdemeanor. But that ship sailed a long time ago because the statute of limitations ran out. So Alvin Bragg tries to bootstrap onto a federal election matter, again, something that the Justice Department, the U.S. federal government, looked at and said, we're going to take a pass on this. But he, as a self-appointed protector of the federal election rules, something he has no purview over whatsoever, tries to put this thing together. And now we actually get jury selection after a whole bunch of them were dismissed because, bluntly, it's going to be very, very, very difficult for Donald Trump to get a fair trial in Manhattan. We get to the actual evidence. And who is the first witness? And look, we all should know that when a prosecution brings a case, their first witness is their star witness. And who is it? David Pecker. And that's really his name, David Pecker. And there's nothing there. I mean, it is just incomprehensible that the prosecution believes that this is their best witness. They've got Cohen yet to come, a convicted perjurer, et cetera, and whether or not a jury that's even disposed to be against Donald Trump can believe anything that comes out of his mouth is yet to be seen. But we're underway, and the thing that is bothering most Americans now is the unfairness of the entire trial in its completeness, but the particular aspect of this gag order. Now again, I don't play one on TV, but I am a lawyer and I used to practice law and I've had a little bit of experience with gag orders. And typically when they are imposed or put in place, they are for everybody and they are to protect the defendant. Here you've got a situation where it's completely flipped on its head. It's imposed upon the defendant only. Donald Trump can't speak, but Cohen can say whatever he darn well pleases. And there's going to come a moment next week when this judge is going to be asked to rule on whether or not Donald Trump has violated that what most of us believe is an unconstitutional order. Watch how that works out, because I believe this judge is jonesing, to use a more modern term, to either put Donald Trump in jail for a little while in a cell or to impose, again, draconian fines upon him. Let's see what happens, because once again, that will boomerang because the American people don't think it's fair. And in other court news, the Supreme Court of the United States earlier this week heard oral argument on the issue of presidential immunity. Now look, we know that there is absolute immunity to the President of the United States for any civil proceedings. The question is, what's the immunity in a criminal proceeding? And as I see it, it really boils down to whether or not the acts for which immunity is sought were public acts, i.e., under the auspices of the office of President of the United States, or whether or not they were private acts and how that is determined. My sense is, from hearing the oral arguments and the questions of the justices, et cetera, that they're inclined to send this back, they call it remand, to the lower court, and that will take some time and push the trial off most likely significantly past November. They might rule on it in its entirety, and there I think they would cut the baby in half. The question is, how close to dead center is that cutting it going to take place? Is it going to be closer to full immunity or closer to lesser immunity? There will be some form of immunity in my judgment, but I don't think it will be total immunity. So let's wait and see. I think that any of those rulings actually politically work for Donald Trump, but they shouldn't have to. That's the underlying thing here. These things shouldn't have to be examined in a political context. They shouldn't be brought in the eve of and during a presidential campaign. This is totally new territory. It is dangerous territory. It is subversive to the Constitution of the United States and to the very fabric of our democratic republic. And finally, I'll just mention my home state of Pennsylvania, which held its primary elections this week, and now the stage is set for the fall campaign. Here's the number one race to watch if you're outside of Pennsylvania, the race for U.S. Senate here, which most likely will determine who controls the U.S. Senate come next January. Bob Casey, we gave him the job because it has his father's last name, but over the course of his entire career, really hasn't done very much for the people of Pennsylvania. And if you ask the average Pennsylvanian, what has Bob Casey done for you? You're likely to get a blank stare. On the other side is Dave McCormick, who in my judgment is the best Republican we've had run for the U.S. Senate in my lifetime. And that says quite a lot. I know I got a little bit of pushback when I said that on the air the other night from some of my Republican friends. That's very fair. They said, what about John Hines? I said, well, he was better looking. And they came up with a couple of others. But I think Dave McCormick, on paper and personally, is the best candidate we've had in a long time. I believe he's going to beat Bob Casey, and I am hopeful that anyone who's watching this within the Commonwealth or outside will talk to every friend that they have in Pennsylvania, because this race really is critical. A couple other ones to watch. I mean, the Democrats have nominated, except for the office of Attorney General where they nominated a more moderate candidate, they have nominated some really far left people, including this Malcolm Kenyatta, who's running for Auditor General. As I said on the air the other night, the biggest thing he's ever audited is his own checkbook, if in fact he's done that. I mean, he has no credentials whatsoever to run against Tim DeFore, the incumbent, who has done an excellent job. So it's going to be very, very interesting to watch statewide. And my own Congressman, Scott Perry, whom all of you know, I'm sure, is being challenged by a former media star who doesn't even live in the congressional district. And yes, constitutionally you can do that, but whether or not the people of my district are going to say yes to an outsider, another question altogether. So please, if you've got a minute, mark those down. And oh, by the way, yes, thank you to those who helped me get elected delegate to the National Convention. I know that is low-level stuff, but it made me happy because this will be my 13th consecutive Republican National Convention, going back to 1976 when I was in Kansas City with Ronald Reagan. And there was an asterisk for 4 years ago because we really didn't have a convention, but I was elected as a delegate and would have been at the convention had there actually been one. But I'm looking forward to being in Milwaukee, and I'm hoping that all of you will take a minute to like, share, and subscribe, because we're asking folks during the month of April to do that. And then we'll try not to bug you about it in the future. But hopefully you're all enjoying a beautiful spring day, because for now, that is the best 60-ish seconds of your week.